Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a deck profile of ABC. Now, the main reasons for this update are, one, I ended up not getting to a bunch of cool direct and indirect support for the theme since the last time I talked about it. 2, ABC Dragon Buster is finally back to 3 on the most recent list that, of course, at this point isn't really new, but still a fun thing. And 3, I've been playing a lot of other decks like Sky Strikers and even visiting Duel Links and stuff recently, revisiting it rather, and so I kind of wanted something a bit more simple, and this is the kind of thing I've been enjoying lately, but it's something that you can tailor to your own needs and wants, and you can actually go into a crazy combo variant or a more control variant in any number of ways. And so in its simplicity, you also have a lot of flexibility, and I just love decks like this, so I thought we'd go ahead and talk about this. If you've never seen the cards in this theme before, I'll do my best and explain everything in this Let's Build video as usual, but I do have an in-depth introduction specifically for ABCs that I recorded a long time ago. I'll link that in the top right-hand iCard, so feel free to check that out in case you want some additional info, but otherwise, we're going to go ahead and build the deck from the ground up and get you started on this, even if this is your first time seeing them. If you just want to see the updated list, you can go ahead and use either the chapter system YouTube has or the table of contents in the description box down below. I always include that for your convenience. You can jump to any part of the video, including the profile, and then if you have any questions, maybe I've answered it somewhere in the video, or just leave a comment down below. But without further ado, let's build ABC Dragoon Buster. The first step in building a deck is to establish the theme and build a core that supports the theme's goals, and I want to start off with a very simple combo nowadays that's possible with one card that we weren't able to do before. We're starting off with 3 copies of our classic field spell Union Hanger and the 1 copy of Terraforming. This gives us 4 ways to search into our ABC pieces and some other key cards, and don't forget it has that second effect where when you normal summon or special summon one of those light Union machine monsters, you're able to equip an appropriate card to it. So what we're going to do is start off by playing a copy of Union Hanger, which will let us search, let's say, 𝕵𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝐷. Normal summoning that, of course, will allow us to equip a monster to it, and that's where we're going to use the new-ish Union driver from Eternity Code. Now, this thing can equip to any monster, so it is a valid target with Union Hanger, and while it's equipped as a Union monster, you can banish it in order to search your deck for another appropriate monster that could be unioned to that card and replace it basically with that. So instead of using the Union driver now, we will banish him, and that will let us equip, let's say, 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏. The interesting thing with these restrictions of the Union monsters is they have once per turn equip or unequip effects, and Union Hanger and Union Carrier and a lot of these other support cards specifically say you can't do both of those things at the same turn, and you can't, let's say, unequip 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏 to special summon it after you equip it with Union Hanger. However, Union Driver does not have any such restrictions on the card that you replace itself with, and so by doing this, we basically have a 1-card addition to the deck that bypasses all those restrictions, allowing us to now special summon 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏, and don't forget, in addition to the Union effects that protect your equipped monster from A, protects from monsters your opponent has, B, from spells, and C, from traps, I like thinking of them just based on the colors of the cards, you also have nifty, not limited abilities that say when they're sent from field to graveyard, you can use their abilities, or if rather, don't miss timing or anything, and you can go ahead and claim a Union monster either from your deck, special summon one from your hand, or in A's case, recur one from your graveyard other than itself. And so this is where we're suddenly able to use Union Hanger to establish 2 monsters. And if in this situation, let's say you have any Union monster in your hand, it could be a spare copy of Buster Drake here, I can go ahead and turn both of these guys into Xyz or something, but then they won't land in the graveyard and I won't get their ability. So the prime candidate for this situation is going to be a Link 2, and right now, what's better than Predaplant Verte Anaconda? We're not going to use its effects quite yet, but just by doing this, we've now used both of these abilities or triggered them, and we can activate them. You'll have to consider the chain link order here, because if you go and use B Buster Drake as chain link 2, it is exposed to something like Ash Blossom, let's say, but it also depends on what card you have in your hand. If you have A in your hand, you'd probably go ahead and do B Buster Drake as chain link 1, and then 𝗵𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗏 as chain link 2, protect the B, you summon your your A anyway to get it on the board, so you have all 3 pieces, and you're able to go ahead and search any other card you want with B. If you don't have A, though, as long as you have a union monster, Yu-Gi-Oh! Game mechanics, of course, let you activate effects as long as they're legal and you could resolve them. And so what you're able to do is flip the order, make yourself vulnerable to Ash Blossom, but in exchange, make it so that B is chain link 2. It will resolve, fetching you a copy of your A Assault Core, and then C will resolve, allowing you to, oh, you don't need to summon this union monster, you can summon A from your hand. And so now, just by playing a union monster, which you probably are playing a ton of in this deck, you're able to go and turn Union Hanger into A on the field, B and C in the graveyard, and Predaplant 𝗿𝗇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝗙 Anaconda, and then from here everything's very simple. Even without using the A Assault Core for any special play, you can go ahead and banish all 3 of the pieces in order to summon ABC Dragon Buster, who of course has a discard quick effect to banish something for very powerful annoying disruption, the ability to tribute itself, which Called by the Grave is now limited, so this is the best time for this thing to be back at 3. You're able to summon back any 3 of your union monsters, including Union Driver if you want to for some reason, and you're able to recur the pieces so that you can keep making big Lincoln Xyz plays on the following turns. But from here, if you just pay the 2,000 life, we're just going to do the standard Red Eyes Fusion, send Dark Magician and Red Eyes Black Dragon to the grave, and now you can summon Dragoon. And this is pretty scary, right? Because if your opponent has to now deal with ABC Dragon Buster, probably a free card you held on to at least because of B Buster Drake searching you stuff, and now you have a remove a card by banishing it, you have a negate a card. If you're going second, you could probably just end the game right here with all this stuff, or even modify the combo to get more extensions. But this is a very consistent thing you can literally do off of one card if your hand contains a union monster, and it's kind of scary to deal with and very simple to pull off. So this is the core that we're going to start off with here. As if Union Driver removing the restriction on Union Hanger weren't enough support, we also have not talked about Unauthorized Reactivation, a new 3-of quick play spell that came out in a Machina or Machina retrained deck, but it's basically E-Tele for this deck. Once per turn, it's a hard once per turn, you could target a machine monster you control, equip an appropriate union from your hand or deck to that guy, but you can't special summon that monster. But we've already talked about how Union Driver basically breaks that mechanic wide open. And so by having a copy of Unauthorized Reactivation in your hand with any normal summonable union monster like 𝗵𝗔 Wyvern, you could go ahead and play this, equip to it, of course, Union Driver, who will banish itself, let you equip something like B, special summon your B, and wow, you have the exact same setup that you had earlier using Unauthorized Reactivation, which we have 3 copies of. And this is a cool thing. Yes, you can do really neat things like go Quick Draw Synchron into Needle Fiber and all these other combo variants, but those tend to be a bit more fragile in terms of being hit by hand traps. This particular build really only dies to Ash Blossom if you end up playing your chains in a weird way and just happen to not open with all your pieces, for example. But other than that, it's fairly solid. You have a lot of 1-card openers. Unauthorized Reactivation rewards you for having 3 copies of each of the ABC pieces because it basically lets you joker into any of the other pieces, or heck, all 3 of the pieces thanks to Union Driver. And overall, the deck, even in its simplest, purest form, has ended up becoming a lot stronger by virtue of this support. So I'm extremely excited to bring this version just because it's not really anything special or anything, but it's still really cool to see that a fun strategy has gotten this kind of really powerful support. Believe it or not, it's already time to talk about the tech in the main deck and extra deck and finish this thing off because it's not really that complicated, and although there is some neat stuff coming up here, it's not really rocket science or anything with this particular strategy. First off, I do like playing some extenders in this strategy, namely 3 copies each of Dinotherium and Photon Thrasher. Effectively, these are just level 4 monsters, and what they let you do is not only go for an easy link play, but you could go for rank 4 summons, sometimes for whatever reason, and just probability, even if you have 3 Union Hanger, the Terraforming, all 3 each of the pieces, and you have Unauthorized Reactivation, you're still not going to get everything in your favor for your 1 or 2 card combos, and this helps you further get consistency up when you combine it with something like, let's say, number 60, 𝗮𝗄 the Timeless, who has a bunch of effects, one of which lets you draw 2 and discard 1 by detaching both of its materials. So let's say you draw like an A Assault Core, you don't have any of the extenders for that, so you just go and plop both of these guys down, and now you're able to go summon this thing, detach A so it's in the graveyard, draw 2, discard one, even one of the cards you drew, and then maybe that's one of the other pieces that you need in order to get things going, or maybe you now draw into like a Union Hanger or an Unauthorized Reactivation. So these are just extra bonuses that help you extend your plays, plus they're not totally restrictive in what you're able to do, because even though, yes, Photon Thrasher makes it so that you have to have no monsters to first summon it, and Dinotherium could potentially give your opponent access to your graveyard for pieces so that you might not be able to put ABC together, if you're careful with how you play them, or just plop them before your opponent can take any of your cards, or you lock yourself out, you just have an extra body on board, and you can further extend your plays just by having an extra monster in play. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with these guys. You could play some other cards here, but I just really liked having the extra extenders, and I felt the level 4 ones were the best for this particular strategy. I also like playing in the main deck here. We'll revisit the extra deck in just a bit and kind of tie it together, but 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. Now, I know a lot of people always ask, oh, what if I don't have these or can't afford these or whatever? I mean, I'm proxying them myself, and I understand this is a very, very expensive card, not something everyone wants to invest in, or anyone really, unless you're playing in remote duels. But what this effectively does is it's the better Dark Ruler No More in this kind of strategy, because you're able to send your A, B, and C pieces to your graveyard in order to blink that many cards on the field, which is just insanely powerful. However, in addition to this thing, you can actually play Dark Ruler No More as a very solid alternative, because we have access to rank 4s. So now we could play Evil Swarm Exciton Knight, whose effect says if your opponent has more total cards than you do on their field in hand, which Forbidden Droplet would help you achieve that just by sending stuff to the grave, but you don't necessarily have to. You're now able to just blow up every card on the field, and your opponent can't take damage, but Dark Ruler No More has that same kind of restriction anyway. So if you had to choose between them in a perfect world, in the current card pool, I would personally say Forbidden Droplet's better for this deck, because like Sky Striker, you want some of your cards in the graveyard, and that helps with that. However, Dark Ruler No More is not a bad pick in this deck by any stretch of the imagination, because you have cards like Evil Swarm Exciton Knight that help you go second anyway. And of course, by playing some of these Xyz monsters, not necessarily with Exciton itself, but you can play things like 𝗿𝗏𝗍𝒍, who's able to clear the board as a quick effect. And of course, if you have either Forbidden Droplet or Dark Ruler No More active, your opponent's not going to be able to respond with their monster effects, which makes it a lot safer to pull off that kind of a board wipe strategy. So something along these lines will generally help you play going second, and you could potentially drop like an ABC on top of all this stuff to just end the game, or make it so your opponent can't fight back once you've softened up their field. So I do like playing those as kind of ways to stop the opponent. And then some very common cards that you see in my decks, you can change these to other hand traps, of course, but think of these as placeholders. At least I like playing the 3 Ash Blossoms, Effect Failure, and Infinite Impermanence, just because they tend to be the general strongest traps that you could play, or hand traps, in response to your opponent. But again, feel free to tweak this to your liking, or wherever you're playing against, wherever you're playing against. That's what those 9 slots are for. Monster Reborn is very cool, because ABC Dragon Buster is kind of dumb in that it doesn't say it needs to be special summoned by its contact fuse ability. You could summon it from your graveyard once you've properly summoned it, and heck, you could do the same thing with your Dragoon as well. It just won't have been fusion summoned with vanilla monsters, so it can't pop stuff, but you can still negate, and it's still a very hard to kill monster. So Monster Reborn is really cool. In addition to its multi-purpose extension properties, it just brings your big monsters live, and it's honestly just absurd what you're able to do with this card. So that's why we play the 1 copy of that. And then the last card in the main before I jump over to the extra for the finishing touches on that is a copy of Heavy Mech Support Armor. This is honestly originally a relic from when I played Brilliant Fusion, because when equipped to your ABC Dragon Buster, it would protect it from targeting, and of course has the generic Union protection from destruction as well. But this is still a very cool one to have, because when you have all the ABC pieces, again, they're not hard once per turn, so you can do some weird loops with like A and C to infinitely recur and special summon and such, and B often will get you other pieces, but once you've already summoned like 2, maybe even all 3 of your ABC Dragon Busters over a couple turns, you no longer need to search anything special. And so I like playing the 1 copy of Heavy Mech, because if you draw this or search this, you can normal summon this, and it's effectively like a debris dragon that brings back one of your Union pieces. And since it's a light machine, you can go for really easy link plays that involve your Union Carrier, your Cross Sheep, all those kinds of things. And so it's just a nice extender to have all around a multi-purpose card. If you wanted, you could honestly just play like an Upstart or a Hand Trap or some other card in this slot. It is a flexible one, but I felt it helps raise the ceiling of the deck when you're able to add in this kind of like a general one-of card that's fully searchable and doesn't really hinder the function of the deck. If anything, it just enhances it. But again, just my pick on this slot there, but feel free to play around with that. And then we just have to talk about 7 extra deck cards here. So to finish up the Xyz toolbox, 1 Abyss Dweller. This goes along with the idea of Evil Swarm Exciton Knight and 𝗿𝗄𝐻, basically just hindering your opponent and punishing them. This thing makes it so, of course, graveyard plays are locked out, so it's always nice to have access to, and sometimes it's more powerful than a board wipe. Barricade Board Blocker is an interesting link too that I'm finally able to play for once. It lets you discard a card from your hand like an ABC piece, and in the end phase of that turn, when you resolve this effect, you can add a continuous or field spell like your Union Hanger back to your hand from your graveyard, and your field spells are protected. Do I summon this all the time? No, but it's just an easy monster you could summon with any 2 monsters with different names. It's a link to you can continue climbing with, which is a big thing in this deck, and it's a discard outlet to help get ABC pieces in the graveyard, have Union Hanger not die, or just straight up recur it altogether if something goes wrong. All around, no reason not to play this card unless the extra deck space ends up becoming ridiculously tight, which sometimes it feels like that, but I feel like this card is good enough to warrant consideration at least. Next, we have Cross Sheep. Now, although I went Predaplant Verte Anaconda as kind of the main going first play, Cross Sheep is actually the better play if you're going second in some situations, if you can't just outright win the game with Dragoon. And that's because his fusion related ability is you're able to go ahead, summon ABC Dragon Buster to this zone, and all of a sudden you can go ahead and revive another monster, continue extending, because Cross Sheep is something you can continue linking with, again, unlike something like Union Carrier, which may be more restrictive. And so when you're able to put this guy on board and bring another monster, heck, you could even go into a Verte Anaconda later in the turn with other monsters after you've link climbed a bit with all your extenders and such. So that's why the Cross Sheep here is just really, really crazy. And honestly, it's just a very flexible way of removing your ABC pieces as well, because he just requires 2 monsters with different names as well, which you just really appreciate in this kind of strategy. IP Masquerena is similar in that it just needs any 2 non-link monsters, so you're often sending ABC pieces to the graveyard, and this thing lets you go and quick effect summon something like a Nightmare Unicorn during your opponent's turn, which is another discard, get rid of a card, kicks it into the deck, of course, but it's similar to ABC Dragon Buster, and it fits right along with the strategy and what it's trying to do. Plus, it makes the monster you summon invincible, so sometimes you just turn something like this into an Apollosa. This is in here because you climb into with all of your pieces. If you wanted to consider Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax, that card's extremely powerful as well, and IP Masquerena is just amazing with that guy, with something like Union Carrier, who's not going to be able to go into a link play during your return anyway. Just think about it depending on the situation you're in. It is going to be one of the strongest guys you could summon with IP Masquerena. That is hard to remove thanks to that anti-destruction ability and Avramax's own protection from targeting, powering itself up, and revenge kicking a card back to the deck. But I didn't have space in the extra deck, and so since I wanted to play all the other options like the Barricade Board Blocker, the Cross Sheep, and all the aforementioned Xyz monsters, I decided to go with Apollosa just because it's the most flexible thing that adds negates, makes things annoying, can get really big, and just uses any monsters I want in order to go for that, especially the link monsters that I mentioned up until this point. But this package I do think is worth considering because you have the Union Carrier that we'll finish off our last card with. So this thing, of course, was used for a lot of degenerate strategies, and sometimes it still pops in here and there with that. But in this deck that it was made for, it is a Union deck, and don't forget you can fetch any ABC piece. You can go and fetch Union Driver if you need to fetch that ability. You can even get something like that One of Tech in heavy mech support armor. But don't forget, all these Union monsters have protection abilities. This thing protects from targeting and destruction. A protects from monster effects your opponent has. B from spells your opponent has, and C from traps. And so you can build a really powerful, nearly invincible ABC sometimes just by having things like Union Carrier. Not really the most absurdly powerful thing in this particular deck. I'm sure there are ways that you can incorporate some other things as well, but since I was playing the Dragoon engine and such, I felt let's go for consistency and not play any other gimmicks on top of that. But it just goes to show that the world's your oyster with this deck. You can go and build this in however direction you would like. There are a ton of options, and this is more of just a standard build as a starting point that I wanted to share with you guys so that you have a solid foundation to work with. And with that, we've successfully built ABC from the ground up. Special thanks to anyone who watched the whole thing. I know even with it being a shorter Let's Build video, it's still a Let's Build video, so I do go and try be as thorough as possible. Hopefully the chapter system was as helpful as it could be, but feel free to comment on any thoughts you have on the deck as well. And don't forget, build this deck however you want. All this stuff here is just my take on it that I personally liked, where I play, and so you may want to use this as a starting point and try something different. But here is my deck. Here we have triple each of A Assault Core, B Buster Drake, and C Crush Wyvern for our ABC pieces. And this is kind of a modified alphabetical order, but I think it still makes sense. We have triple Dinotherium and Photon Thrasher for extenders, triple each of Hand Traps, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, and Effect Veiler, but again, those are all flexible hand trap slots. Play whichever ones are best for you. We have Heavy Mech Support Armor and Union Driver as one of tech options. Then we have our standard Red Eyes Fusion combo here, so, Dragoon's just really easy to play in this deck, why not? Then for spells, we have Forbidden Droplet at 3. This is a frequently asked question these days on these videos, so this deck in particular with Exciton Knight, you can most definitely run Dark Ruler No More instead, so that's a valid option. Hopefully that minimizes extra questions on that. Sometimes you have to make a sacrifice and not play this versus something else, but in this deck, I think it's totally appropriate to play Dark Ruler No More without necessarily losing too much. We have Monster Reborn for extension, Terraforming, and then we have some unfair cards in triple Unauthorized Reactivation and Union Hanger, and then our last cards here are Infinite Impermanence. Again, flexible slots there, but I do like to make the 9 hand traps there for 40 total cards in the main. And then extra deck, we have triple ABC Dragon Buster and 1 Dark Dragoon. For Xyz monsters, we have Abyss Dweller, Evil Swarm Exciton Knight, and number 60 𝗮𝗯 the Timeless, plus the evil Zeus. So we're playing this guy here. And then Link 2s, we have Barricade Board Blocker, Cross Sheep, IP Masquerena, Predaplant Verte Anaconda, and Union Carrier. Then we have for our Link 3, Nightmare Unicorn to go with the IP, and we have our lone Link 4 in Apollosa, Bow of the Goddess. That's it for now, but feel free to grab one of these videos on your way out. If you really enjoyed what you saw today, remember to subscribe to JD Gaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JD Gaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.